Hello, everyone. It's Mark Holthe here, Canadian immigration lawyer, ex-immigration officer, and former high school teacher, back again in really a short time frame from my last live stream. What I wanted to do yesterday was a breakdown, and I did it last night. And you can go over here to the YouTube channel, and you'll see that I did Canada election 2021 now over. Go check that one out. You, if you want to jump ahead just a few minutes, the initial part was really an apology. And I think to a large extent, when you're doing these live streams, you expose yourself to saying things that you regret you say. And that's exactly what happened with the live Q&A that I did back on, well, 6 days ago, basically, I guess 7 days ago. That live Q&A that I completed here, if I open this one up here and I'll stop it, and I'll see if I can find, let's just let this play out here. Okay, here.
So let's say you have to read an incredibly long email from your boss that you have to finish before the big meeting.
Let's jump through. Afghan. So I want to find a good, you can choose the country. I want to find a good spot here. A perfect example. Let's see if I can find the right image here. Let's see, I'm trying to find the right picture to identify me for that particular video. And I'm struggling a little bit finding it. I'm trying to find one where my mouth is wide open because it needs to be wide enough for my foot to fit inside it. And I know I had one here, but oh, we're just about there. Oh, we're just about. This is kind of funny, actually, but it's kind of serious. Well, the mouth isn't open as wide as I want there. Okay, there we go. That's kind of sort of. Okay, we'll leave it there. So what I'm getting at, you guys, is last video I made a comment, and of course it was in the context of a big long discussion, but you know, people, they tend to focus on words, and words are important and they mean things. And I had made a comment that Canada doesn't owe you anything. And that was in the context of describing the legal obligations that Canada has to people that are not permanent residents and citizens. And obviously that was extremely offensive to people who have been sacrificing their whole lives. So last night at the beginning of the video, I talked about this right here. And those of you who watched the video, this will be a little bit of a replay, but I want to try to just share a little story that I think applies exactly to what we've got going on here with all of you that are outlanders, that are either with expired COPRs or that have applications pending, or that are just hoping for a no program specified draw that will allow you as a federal skilled worker to be able to enter into the express entry pool. And there was a lot of comments in that were completely fair. Comments that were very negative, and I've never had a video where I've had so many negative comments. You can see like there's 22 thumbs down, and all of it was completely justified. So my comment that Canada doesn't owe you anything was more in the context of legal ramifications, but notwithstanding that, it was completely off base, and I should not have said that. And that's not what I meant. It was more in reaction to the comments that were coming down from people. And there's absolutely certain things that the government has no control over. They never could have predicted the pandemic. They never could have predicted that countries would lock down, that they would create rules for social distancing that would prevent officers from actually being in the visa offices to process applications, and that that social distancing that basically spread throughout the whole world just destroyed the paper-based application process and caused everything to be shut down, because obviously everybody was concerned about the health of officers and people spreading the virus, and no one knew where it was going to go. So horrible, horrible stuff. But we are closing in now on a time where the government has some serious, serious issues that they have to work through. So that comes back right here to this little guy here. So what I wanted to do was just tell you just a little story. And those of you who watched it last night, it's going to be a little bit of a repeat. But in the 1970s, there was an experiment that some scientists put together, some researchers, to try to figure out the effects of diet on heart health. And so what do? In those days, you used animals as test subjects. And so they used a control group of rabbits who were fed a very high fat diet. And then they monitored kind of their blood pressure and their heart rate and cholesterol and things like that to see what the effects were. Obviously, many of the rabbits showed a buildup of fatty deposits, which, you know what? That's me. I guess I could be that rabbit, because over the last while, I have definitely had a diet of high fat, which is not great. I just love to eat. And I think I have a food addiction is what it is. I need to get control over that, but that's a side discussion. So many of these rabbits showed a buildup of fatty deposits, but not all of them. And this was the problem. There was one group that surprisingly had as much as 60% less than the other control groups. And they couldn't figure it out. And the scientists it was driving them crazy. And this was in the 1970s. And they couldn't figure out what it was. They'd used the same breed of rabbits from New Zealand, and they were virtually the identical gene pool. Everything was consistent within all of the test subjects. And so they're trying to figure out, well, what does this mean? Why is this one group? There's something different. And they struggled until they basically discovered a very unexpected, I guess, factor that they hadn't counted on. And so they eventually turned their attention to the research staff, the ones that were helping with the experiments. And they were wondering, was it possible that maybe one of these research staff had done something different, with how they were performing their role within the project that was affecting things? And so as they looked at this particular group, one of the scientists reported that one of the researchers, one of the people that was feeding the animals, was unusually kind and caring as an individual. When she fed the rabbits, she talked to them, she cuddled them and petted them. She couldn't help it. That's just how she was. And she gave them all the same food, but she actually gave these little rabbits love. And this was known as the rabbit effect. And at first they couldn't believe that just by petting the rabbits and talking to them and being kind to them, talking being the important part, communicating with them, that it literally made a difference on their health and their well-being, notwithstanding their fatty diet. So they repeated the experiment with the exact same results. Same thing happened. And so this report was published in a prestigious journal called Science, and years later it has been coined the rabbit effect. So I want to liken this to what's happening within our immigration system. And some of you may have noticed recently that immigration has decided they're just not going to communicate at all. So all along throughout the pandemic, when it comes to you outlanders, those of you outside of Canada, they have done just a really terrible job of communicating with you. You've had to do access to information requests to try to figure out where your file is at. When you try to call the call center, well, you can only do that if you're in Canada. And so you can't speak to anyone at the visa offices. There's virtually no communication. Now, can you guys imagine a world where immigration, and this is where I'm going to fault them because they have royally messed this up, where they just communicated with you? They said, look, our officers are all home. We don't have anyone at the visa offices, and it's likely you're not going to get your application processed for 7 or 8 months. And they actually communicated that with you. There was a hotline where you could call, you specifically, a number to ask and get real answers, not just generic answers on where your situation was, so that you could govern yourselves accordingly, so that you could decide, oh, maybe I need to get a job again. Maybe I need to, to get a house or whatever it is, because I've sold it, I've liquidated all my assets, and now I am ready to travel, and you're telling me I can't go. Well, that level of communication, and that's where, yes, maybe from a legal standpoint, they don't owe anyone anything other than how they treat everyone equally, which is very poor right now. But imagine what it would be like if they actually were transparent and communicated and showed respect to you guys. And we're just and one of the comments in the last video was someone who said it really is just a matter of decency and respect, to be able to communicate, not just leave people spinning in the wind. And I think that's the problem. Yes, there are certain things that are outside of their control. as far as the pandemic, as far as the inability to send officers back to visa posts to start processing in larger volumes because of the pandemic, because of domestic rules in those countries, because of the unions with the visa officers and not exposing them to, to dangers with the pandemic and things like that. There's a lot of factors that immigration didn't have control over and couldn't have predicted how this would all play out. But one factor that they bloody well have control over is the ability to communicate. And right now I'm going to call them out because they have virtually stopped all ability for people to understand where their files are at. And that is not acceptable. You've got a situation where immigration, yes, they've got lots going on, and now they've chosen to place significant emphasis on the Afghan situation, which no one is going to question that. But the reality is all of the people, all of their everybody's a stakeholder in this, even the people that are applying for permanent residence. All of you out there who are just desperately wanting information, wanting to be able to move forward with your lives, who've been left trapped. My heart goes out to you guys. And, there's always people out there who are just looking for opportunities to attack anyone, not just what they feed off of. But my comment last week was not appropriate, and it's not how I feel. This is more, it wasn't even taken out of context because I should never have said it in the way that I did. And yes, they're as far as a legal obligation, they've held out that they are to process applications in a certain period of time. But with the pandemic, it's thrown everything upside down. We call that kind of a force majeure situation. But what they have control over is communication, and they have not done that. And right now, shame on the government for not doing a better job of keeping people up to date with where they're at. And they have the ability to apply government resources to hire more officers to be able to actually communicate with people and open up those lines of communication. When at this moment, they're using the Afghan crisis, the pandemic as excuses to justify why they shouldn't talk to you or communicate to you. And understand, even us immigration lawyers and consultants, we also have all of our avenues cut off as well. And they don't want to talk to us or respond because they're so busy dealing with other things. That is not acceptable. And for a country like Canada, that's something that we should be ashamed of, because it is not rocket science to put in place resources to be able to give people the information on how and what to expect with their applications. So I'm not going to go into any more with that, but that's the rabbit effect. And basically I wanted to just apologize for the comments that I made last week, and everybody that was saying nasty comments and saying this guy's a joker and everything. You guys are probably right. I probably am, and maybe there's nothing that I share here on this channel that's really of any substantive worth. And I'm just, I'm not going to say that I'm wasting my time, because I know a lot of people benefit from what I share, but for some of you, you may choose not to watch this anymore, and that's totally fine. At the end of the day, I'm just doing the very best that I can to try to help. And on occasion, when you're doing a live stream as opposed to a pre-recording, which is a lot of the other channels, very few do live streams where the person just gets on and talks. Everything is pre-scripted. The people that are doing it really don't have a really solid understanding of all aspects of immigration because they're not in the trenches. And yes, sometimes I get passionate. Sometimes I say things that I regret. And I hope you'll forgive me for those comments from last week. And I will do my best to re-earn your trust. Okay. Akthar. Hey, Akthar from Revelstoke. You're the first one in, at least within my comments. Welcome. Good to see you. Okay. Singh says, can we add spouse after receiving PNP nomination with 600 points in our EE profile? Maybe. I'm going to click on this right here, my friend. This one. And I'm going to direct you to go back. Let's see if we can find this here. I'm just going to adjust a few things on my screen. I think this should fit. I'm going to ring that bell, and then I'm going to point you back here and tell you to book a consult, my friend, because the process of whether or not you can actually add a spouse depends on a lot of factors. Generally, there is the possibility of doing that, and I've done it with clients, but I don't want to just give you the green light without knowing a whole lot more about your situation. So I definitely recommend that you book a consult, and we can sort that out. Okay, there we go. This one, Vridi, I've seen this asked so many times all night yesterday from 6 p.m. until whenever we wrapped up at just about 8 o'clock p.m. This was one of the main questions. And the true answer, and I think everybody out there who's trying to speculate, is that at this stage, We just don't know. Before this Afghan thing blew up, I would have said that immigration is now going to be applying all these officers to deal with these horrible backlogs of you guys that are outlanders, not in Canada. But with the Afghan thing, with the way they've treated us, with the way they've cut off all lines of communication, I have to assume that there isn't a light immediately at the end of the tunnel, and that you guys are still going to be stuck in this situation for some time. And, in Alberta here, we're back into wave 4 of the virus, and they've started to lock things back down again a little bit. And so we're not out of the woods yet. And, like I told people last night, and like I tell you guys today, my heart goes out to you. I can't imagine what it would be like being in this state of limbo where you can't move forward and you can't go backwards. And yes, you always have the ability to just say, screw it, I'm just giving up on Canada and I want my money back. Like you have the ability to do that. But the problem, obviously for most people, is that you don't want to. You still have this hope that things are going to work out. And for people that are sitting with, that were 29 years old, that they know that, a birthday's come and now they're 30 and they've lost those extra 5 points, which drops their score down to 467. Maybe last year, maybe 2 years before the pandemic, they would have been in Canada already. And now maybe they've lost their opportunity to immigrate because the CRS scores are too high. But my heart goes out to you guys. And I'll be honest, I just don't know. But one thing I will promise, in my calls with immigration, when they start to be a little bit more transparent, because they've really kind of locked down a little bit more, even in our calls with being open and transparent with how things are happening. But the moment I find out, I will let you know. Amit, good to see you down in Virginia. Himanshu, good to see you. Vishvesh says, good to see you fresh. Yeah, I'm pretty fresh this morning. I had a good sleep last night. Yeah, and there's the same questions. So those of you who are asking these questions about when are they going to start issuing, passport requests, I just don't know. So that's kind of a global answer to everybody who's asked that question. We're just not sure. But the moment we start to see things moving forward, I will tell you guys. I know that they are working on applications, but it is so slow now, especially with this whole shift because of the Afghan situation. Okay. Good to see you, Cindy from Vancouver. Hello, Noor. Let's see what else we have here. Yeah, and this is another question, Carlos. So same one. You can see how frequently these questions are coming up. Right now, it's really the Afghan situation coupled with the pandemic, coupled with the waves going on in different countries. And obviously different countries affect the processing of applications depending on what the situation is with the pandemic in that country, whether or not the visa offices are able to return back to a fully staffed office, which because of the social distancing and many countries are not able to do that. And Alberta, we were open through the summer, and now they've kind of dialed it back a little bit and encouraged people from working from home. And so we're not out of the woods. Okay. Michael says you work too hard, Salu. Thank you. I appreciate that. Actually, that's not a compliment, I don't think. I think that's probably advising me that my poor eating habits and everything, and I need a haircut too, are all associated with me probably just spending too much time and not having a little bit more time to rest and recharge each day. But hey, this stuff is important, and the sole purpose of doing this is obviously to help people out there and to build my practice and my business as an immigration lawyer. Do I want you guys to go over to my website and book a consult and hire me and go through what I believe is one of the absolute best ways of representation, which is our collaborative review model? Do I want you guys to do that? Yes, I do. Why am I doing this? To show you that I'm someone you can trust, someone who you can see live, has a level of competency to make your life and your application what it needs to be to get approvals and to reach your immigration goals. So that's what I do. That's why I do all of this. Okay. And so, yeah, as far as the next FSW draw, I've been looking every day. And if we go back once again to the rounds of invitations, let's just pull those up. IRCC, that should work. And if we go to the rounds of invitations, and we look at it, I'm going to look at this historically. So we know the last one, September the 15th, it was PNP and 521, and the low score is 732, obviously, because with the PNP, you get 600 points. If we go to the previous rounds of invitations and we look at this, you'll see that there's been a trend to reduce the number of applications for CEC. So you can see here back in July or June, that was the last big 6,000 draw. And you can see that pushed the score all the way down to 357. But slowly they've been tapering off. 4,500, 4,500, 3,000, 3,000. And then on the 14th, it was 2,000. So that is an indicator. And, you know, that if they're starting to slow down with the in Canada, obviously they've got a massive backlog of people outside that really need to be processed first. They need to take care of those people that are stuck in limbo, and then focus on individuals, new individuals, new outlanders. But understand that the quotas, and you know, we have over 108,000 that are specifically targeted this year for express entry. You know, that's the FSW, CEC, and the Federal Skilled Trade Program. Those numbers, understand, don't look at the numbers of invitations issued as a factor in whether or not, you know, they're going to issue more, because any invitations that are issued now will not affect this quota. It will fall to next year. And I think you guys have probably also are very much aware. And if you watched the video I did last night, I went into detail. But the federal election is, it's basically over. Now, there are some ridings where they're still counting. You can see here, there are still, you know, unresolved. There's a number of ridings here, okay, that are still not quite finalized, but they won't affect the final numbers. So the Conservatives are not going to catch the Liberals. The Liberals are not going to reach 170, which would be a majority government that would allow them to basically follow through with everything that they have, you know, intend to do as a party without having to check. And you can see here 170 seats right here to majority, and they're not going to reach it. So what does that mean? We're in the same exact situation politically as we were before the election. Liberal minority, they're going to have to work with the Conservatives, the Bloc, the New Democrats, and the Greens if they want to pass any legislation, right? So technically, if you look at 158 and then 25 for the New Democrats, so if the New Democrats were following in line with the Liberals, then that would be all that they needed to pass whatever they need to pass. But I want to point something out to you guys. None of the parties are anti-immigrant. And you've seen immigration was not an issue on the election, for the simple reason that everybody's all on side with the need for immigrants to help with the economic recovery in Canada. And so it's very unlikely that any of the proposed changes, and I do encourage you to go back and watch the video last night, because I went through systematically through everything that the Liberals had promised, including increased, you know, and dealing with the processing times as a priority, the reunification of families, the modernization of the immigration system. And in the spring, we're probably likely to see the mandate letters from the Prime Minister to the ministers of each department, including immigration. Minister Mendicino was reelected, so he's still our immigration minister. I'm not sure. Sometimes they do cabinet shuffles. Maybe he will move on. Maybe there'll be a new minister. But at this stage, the vast majority of ministers were reelected for the Liberals. So anything affecting immigration is really not going to be changing much. At least from what they had intended to follow through with before the election. So that's kind of status quo. But another thing I want to point out with you guys, everything that they've done with you outlanders, the votes show that, you know, basically in Canada, from an immigration perspective, how they've dealt with immigration, no one has had a problem with it. So we expect things to kind of move forward status quo, but they've been given, you know, a green light for how they dealt with it during the pandemic. And even the way that in which they're dealing with you guys now, the lack of communication, I've got huge issues with it. But unless we voice our concerns, unless we, you know, we are very vocal in social media, and we get the attention of the plight that everybody is going through, personally, I think it's interesting how often immigration policy is developed on public shaming. Essentially, if the government is embarrassed about something or some lack of action taking, then there's a newspaper article that's posted that then calls out the government for something that's affecting individuals And then the government will step on it and, and put it up as a priority and move forward. And so the Afghan thing is a big political thing as much as it is for those poor people in Afghanistan. And so, the liberals jumped on that, and now they've made it a priority, just like they did with the Syrian refugees, which no one is going to fault them for doing that. But whenever you do that, then other people are, by its very nature, when you have limited resources, are going to be left in the dust a little bit until you can get back to them because they're a lower priority. So you Outlanders, my heart goes out for you. And it's the same thing like I talked about right here. It's this rabbit effect. If they could just communicate with you and really tell you what's going on and communicate with us. That's all we ask. We understand there's things they control and things they can't, but just don't close things off and give people real information that they can rely upon and talk to them personally and, hire more officers if you need to. So anyways, let's keep zipping through here. Okay, Harpreet says Manitoba claimed different 2 knock codes, one in occupation and demand and one outside from occupation of Manitoba. Not quite sure, Harpreet, what your question is there. Yeah, Hajvir, this is an issue, a big issue. That people who had initial approvals kind of in principle, that first stage approval, are now seeing their study permits refused. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be class actions. So yeah, it's a mess. It's a real mess. Okay. And Ankit, namaste to you as well. Yes. Hope to get PPR and Perch in Canada soon. Yes. So we'll keep our fingers crossed the 27th. And we'll see how that plays out. TR to PR RC asking for description of duties. Yes, that's one of the requirements, Edward, when you're submitting reference letters, especially for the essential workers, to show that you actually have the duties that align with the knock code that you've chosen that had to have been on the essential worker list. Let's see here. And yeah, and just to remind everybody, so Vridi, I answered that question. Sorry, right here, Vridi, I answered that question about finalization FSWs. We just don't know. But trust me, the moment I hear anything, I will share it with you guys. And so anyone who's asking those questions, there's a reason I'm skipping past because I've kind of talked about it a couple times already. Okay, and the same thing for why IRCC is not issuing PPRs and COPRs to outland spouses of inland CEC candidates while primary applicants receive their e-COPRs. It's because of the need for visas to be imprinted in passports overseas, the need for visa officers to be actually on the ground to deal with overseas applicants, whereas in Canada, they don't need to. There's no visas. So that's why they can process them without having that whole issue of printed COPRs and photos and doing all of those things. So that's why. Now, the reality is I would hope that immigration is learning from this, that you don't need to have paper to do that you can have things, linked to the passport where you can scan it and say, yes, the visa is valid. That doesn't require some physical visa put in the passport, because that's been the problem. And that's something we have been encouraging them for a long time, all throughout this pandemic, to get rid of these goofy things. And also, one thing I'll point out as well that I talked about last night was that part of the Liberals' campaign was to create a visa for overseas spouses and dependents to allow them to be able to come without being blocked for not having temporary intent and having their visas refused because you're the subject of a spousal sponsorship. So they put that in their platform, and we'll see if they actually follow through with that. Okay. Okay. TR to PR, is it mandatory to provide handwritten signatures on police clearance certificate? It just needs to be a scanned, whatever the official form is, follow the instructions on the IRCC website, and the document that's issued has to be the official document requested by IRCC. Sometimes it's important to always scroll down to the bottom because there can be additional information or specific notes. And sometimes that gives you a hint as to what's the accepted document and what isn't. But you have to, Sukumani, you really have to pay close attention to it. And when it comes to handwritten signatures, there are some places that don't have those when they issue them. And so it just depends on the country. Imani says, glad to attend your live streams for the first time. Great. Hey, we've got someone new. Well, go back and watch. And yes, I put my foot in my mouth quite frequently. All mistakes, don't worry about it. Keep making these informative videos. Stay blessed. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Okay. Faisal says, hey, more question. IRC has uphold all PR applications that's been submitted outside Canada when IRC will lift. Yeah. So guys, listen, I cannot see any world. Okay. I can't see any world whatsoever, Faisal, where immigration and those fearmongers out there who are saying this, they have repeatedly said that they will not screw over the people overseas that are, that have been waiting patiently in the queue. So I can't see any world. And especially remember, there are very lofty targets that they're trying to hit for immigrants. So they want you. It's just with the complication of, like I said, everything I talked about related to the pandemic, those delays are there. But they are not going to go out of their way to just cull out everybody and say, oh, too bad, we don't want you anymore. I can't see any world where that would happen. It's just not fathomable at all, given the circumstances. If the government, let's say we had the People's Party of Canada, let's say we go here, who tend to be a lot less immigration facilitative. Let's say they were elected. Of course, they've got no votes here. And they decided, you know what, we're going to cut immigration drastically. Well, maybe that party, I could see them, well, I don't know really what their policies are in immigration, but I'm assuming they're more strict than the Liberals. If they were to get elected and then they said, we're going to cull them out. Well, maybe if it was something like that, but no, the Liberals have repeatedly said, the ministers repeatedly said how important immigrants are, and they're not going to just waste that, scrap it, and then start over from scratch. It's not going to happen, Faisal. So anyone who's saying that are fearmongers, and you can basically just tell them to take a hike because it's not going to happen. Now, with that being said, you have an obligation that if you get a notification from immigration and you're in that queue pending, that you have to be prepared to act quickly. You have to be prepared to respond and say, yes, I'm still interested in continuing, because some people may have said, I'm done with this. If they have that much disrespect for me as an applicant, that they're not even communicating with me, I'm moving on with my life. I'm moving to Dubai and I've got a great job out there. Who knows what it is, but no, I don't see that happening. Okay. 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 Danoa says, can we add spouse after? Okay, we've got that one. I've addressed with that one. Okay. Akram says, in general, are you satisfied with the decisions prioritizing certain applications, the pause of FSW of current Minister of Immigration? No, I'm not. I'm not at all. I think there are things that they could have done to better facilitate individuals. Remember, especially right now. So the travel restrictions do not restrict people that are COPR holders from traveling to Canada. And I think there's things that they could have done to eliminate the need for a confirmation of permanent residence. I think they could have implemented things that would allow for, similar to an e-COPR, to be for outland applicants, and to recognize that they've been in limbo for almost 2 years. And I think that's not fair. I think they've been trying to push through in Canada applications to meet their levels. Well, what is a level? Like, eventually if they come, well, whatever. Why do why is it so critical that you race right now to try to meet those levels? I know it's important, and I believe 100% in the TR to PR pathway, but I think absolutely they could have done so much more for people outside of Canada. And so no, I'm not completely satisfied with their decisions. I think they could have done things differently. Okay. Okay. So hello, Mark. I have a question. Wes, send a report to my friend, which is fake document, not to use in the future. So what if she wants to apply study permit? Is there any complication? I have no clue what you're saying here. I'm going to ring this bell. Wes, and a fake document. I'm not sure what that would be. Wes isn't in the habit of sending fake documents, so I recommend you book a consult. We can talk about that one. Let's see here. Yes. Okay. And now I'll address this one, and then I'll skip through all the other TR to PR pathways. Understand, guys, just so that everybody knows, with the TR to PR pathway, if we jump in here, I'm just going to show you very quick, and then we can probably address this pretty fast. So the TR to PR pathway, many of you know that when the time came to apply, and the very first day, all 40,000 of these applications was hit the very first day. So the first people to apply in the first few minutes, and those of my those of my students who attended my TR to PR pathway course, which is still open, And remember, if you are a healthcare worker, you can still go to the Canadian Immigration Institute. I'm not sure if I have the link below or not. And you can go to our courses and you can see the tier to PR pathway is still there for you. And it's 50% off of what the original price was. But with the TR to PR pathway, this massive influx of applicants, the first ones were processed really quick. But once they got through those first ones and the backlog started to pile up, understand that TR to PR pathway is not going to go fast. There's going to be people that are waiting for acknowledgements of receipt. And they're going to have people, that submitted after them that get those first, because once the files are assigned to officers, then they work through them, as fast as they can work through. Some people have family, which takes it longer, even if the family's all with them in Canada. Some people have family that are outside of Canada and they're inside Canada. Some people are single individuals. All of those things play a role, but the TR to PR pathway is still first in, first out, FIFO, essentially. And so subject to those variations. But in terms of time, I understand 2 months and you're still waiting. This is not unusual. And the reason is because it's not like Express Entry where if you're missing something, they would just refuse it. My goodness, if that was the case, you guys, there would be probably 20,000 of these applications that would have been rejected. And I'm positive it would have been that high if they applied the R10 rule that they do for Express Entry, where if anything is missing, they just return the application. At least half of those would have been just rejected. And the perfected applications would have gone through faster. So not surprising, expect it to be a long time to process the TR to PR pathway through to conclusion. And that's another reason why they created the equivalent of the bridging open work permit to allow people whose work permits were expiring to be able to bridge the gap until their application was officially approved. And so there's a long answer, but anyone else that's asking about TR to PR, I think that covers those questions. So I'm going to skip through those as I go down. Wahid, hello. Good to see you. Namal. Okay, let's see if I can make sense of this. Good afternoon. Deepening child age for Canada, PR in Canada after PNP cert. Dependent, maybe. Okay, I think I'm trying to figure this out, you guys. So 22, once the child turns 22, if you have not filed your permanent resident application at that time, then that child is no longer considered to be a dependent unless they are a dependent for basically because of a disability. And you have to be able to demonstrate that. Okay. Yeah, this is another one, Josephine. Any information on applications January 2020 for home child provider pilot program? That is a freaking gong show. And once again, we had lots of concerns about that program when it was created. And once again, we've seen very, very little movement in there. And yeah, it just sucks, especially outside of Canada when you're waiting. And when the processing times can be up to a year to process those, like what caregiver, the people that you're coming to care for, especially, the home support worker, the person you could be looking to care for is passed away before you even get it approved. So we've had lots of issues with that. We understood the problematic nature of the whole caregiver program, the abuse that existed out there, the challenges that people had many, many years of processing. They were trying to fix it, but I wish they would have consulted more with us at the front end when they were creating that program. Okay, this is a good question, Mohammed, and many people ask this. Having an active profile does impact on when you're applying for a study permit. I always advise my clients that if you don't think you're going to get drawn under Express Entry, don't put a profile in. Now, obviously, study permits, they can't just refuse you because you have a profile in. But there is the expectation that you will return home following the completion of your studies. That's the underlying principle behind study permits, that you're going to school in Canada to study, get Canadian education, and then use that to improve your job prospects and advance your career in your home country, not transition to permanent residence. And that temporary intent is one of the factors that they use. And in the legislation, there is a concept of dual intent, the intention to abide by the temporary conditions, but still one day become a permanent resident. But overseas visa officers, when they're trying to really reduce the number of study permits they issue, because there were far too many issued in the past. And now that's why we have all of these massive problems with international students who are now graduated, who are now trying to get through the PR programs, who, all through the pandemic, maybe weren't able to work. All of these steps are having to do to try to accommodate for all of these hundreds of thousands of international students. Now they're becoming much more strict, and it's not so easy to get it, especially for people they believe are using the study permit to really transition to express entry. Even though international students are some of the best candidates for immigration to Canada out of everybody, right? But that's one of the problems with the system. And so I always advise people, if you have a choice, don't put your profile in if you're thinking about applying for a study permit. Now, there are lots of people who have had a profile in, apply for the study permit, it's been approved. So I'm not saying that if you have one that life is over, but it forms a part of your record the moment you click submit. So those of you who decide to pull your profile from the pool and say, oh, there, now I'll apply for my study permit. Well, you can do that. There's nothing stopping you, but it's not like the fact you've applied before is erased. And so they take all of those things into place. They put all those things into place. Yeah. And Rajveer, I'll acknowledge this comment every bit. Yeah. Please, sir, please help Quebec students because they are getting refusals from IRCC. They were waiting for 1.5 years in India and now all are depressed. It is not fair. I agree. And my response to you, okay? My response to you is, what is your education agent doing for you? The one that convinced you to apply for those schools. What is the school doing for you to lobby the government in these situations? And I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not involved with international students to any degree other than assisting people with applying for their study permits. But when it comes to the recruitment of international students to attend any of the schools in Canada, my first question is, what is that agent doing who convinced you to go to that school? And what is that school doing for you to lobby the government in these, when study permits are being refused? That's my question. You're paying both of those entities money, and they should be doing something to support you and help you. Maybe they are, but that's the question I have, Rajveer. Okay. Let's see here if we can get to some new stuff. Okay, Fred says, just want to ask if I can use my police certificate that I got 2 to 3 months before I created my profile and ETA. Understand it all comes down to the validity of your police certificates. So it's pretty simple. IRCC, let's see, we'll just type in police certificate. Let's see what comes up here. How to get a police certificate. So this here is where you go to actually choose and obtain your police certificate. And then this here is a breakdown of the rules associated with it. Okay. What is it? Who needs one? When should I submit one? How do I get one? How long is it good for? Okay. Is good for, depends on what immigration program you're applying to. And then you can click on the instruction guide to figure out what it is. So the short answer for you, and this applies to most places, Fred, is that if it's the country where you currently live in, okay, so that I got 2 to 3 months before I created my profile. So you're not telling me how long ago that was. Police certificates that were obtained from the country that you live in are generally only valid for 6 months. So if you obtained it before you left the country and came to Canada before, then it's only going to be valid for 6 months. If you obtained it after you left the country and you've never returned back since it was issued, then those police certificates generally don't expire. However, just to reiterate, there are different rules for different programs. And just like immigration has identified here, you need to go and they actually will give you instructions on when they expire, whether it's express entry or for what program you're applying for. But that's the general rule, Fred. Okay. Okay. Nisrin says, what does some mean for job duties for my knock? And do you suggest I add job experience that I don't fulfill the job duty requirement? Some. You got me here, Nisrin. So within the knock, and let's just flip over here. And I know lots of you have seen the videos about the knock changing, but do not stress over that right now. And you can see the knock 2021. Those of you who are fixated with all the lovely changes here, you can see here, they're in the process of updating this, and it's going to radically shift the way occupational classifications are in Canada. But for the time being right now, we're still using the 2016. That's what we lock into. So I'm just trying to see, let's pick, let's just choose a cook here. Search. I'm just pulling up one so that I can see if I can identify this some verbiage. So when you look in here, you'll see there is what I usually deal with is may. So any of these mays are not mandatory. Okay. So anything that says you may do this, then it's not mandatory. I'm trying to find some. Some is also not, maybe you can give, well, we don't have time to circle back around to this, but you can see here employment requirements in the context of express entry. None of this applies. But if you're applying for an LMIA and a work permit, then you actually have to meet this. And if it says usually required, this is discretionary. It's not mandatory. If it says, oh, here's may. So it says, if it says may be required, once again, it is also discretionary. It's not mandatory. So really for the process of a cook, and it didn't used to be this way. If you look down here, this was last updated July 29th, 2021. So it was literally just updated a short period of time. For cooks, this used to be a requirement and must have experience before you can, may be required. This used to be is required. And then it's voluntary, and then Red Seal is also available. So there's no specific requirements. Now, in your question here, for job duties for my knock, you suggest I add job experience that I don't fulfill the job duties requirement. Okay, so to make this short, the duties that you're providing in your reference letter are the duties that you actually performed. You're never going to put any duties in there just because they're ones that are laid out specifically in here. You're not just going to copy this. We know that. And when it comes to your reference letter, you're also going to put the ones that you actually performed. Now, sometimes an employer will provide a job description. You'll say, hey, employer, you missed these duties right here, and I actually performed them. And the employer will say, oh yeah, you're right. Okay, then add those in. But otherwise, you're never going to add ones in job experience that's not listed there. And then when it comes time to having duties that are more than are listed in here, like if you have extra duties, as long as those extra duties are not going to pull you into a completely different knock, obviously you're going to list exactly what you did. And so I think that probably covers off every aspect of that whole question. And sometimes it's hard to figure out exactly what someone's asking in a few words. Okay. All right, let's see here. Okay, Shaw's basically says, if I sell my car and receive around 10,000 cash for it, do I have to add any document such as statutory letter, just explanation letter enough? Do you have a bill of sale for the car? I'd include that as showing I sold the car, and that's where the funds come from. And if the person pays you cash and you're depositing it into your account, that's probably the best thing I could think of is a bill of sale for the car, and showing that the car was sold to a different person and that's where the funds came from. And then I would include that in a letter of explanation, showing that's the source of the funds from your bank statement. Cheryl, good to see you down in the Philippines. Hello. Wait, is this relay of last night's live? That's funny. Nope, it's not a replay. Okay, there's not much that I can say about the Afghan refugees. I know that when it comes to a lot of organizations, especially us lawyers, we have put together a lot of pro bono assistance for anyone in Afghanistan that's suffering. There's a lot of groups out there across the country, bar associations, special organizations that are there to help people answer questions, assist with filling out application forms. Our hearts go out to anyone who's in Afghanistan right now. It's a really, really difficult situation. And so, so you can do a Google search, the Canadian Bar Association. I'm trying to see if we have our stuff posted, but we have put together, let's just see here if we can find it. Just give me a second here. Yes. Okay, so this is I'll just show you. This is some of the things that the Canadian Bar Association does. This is what we do. So this is our pro bono initiative for the crisis in Afghanistan. And these are volunteer immigration lawyers and their firms that have volunteered to be available to answer your questions. So any of these lawyers, you can reach out. That describes the language that is offered within the firms, and I'll give them all a shout out. Arvin is there. Tiago, Argavan, her firm, she's there. Sheila Gupta, Anna, who's in Edmonton, Kranacheva, Kamaljit Lahal, Humer, Lisa in Quebec. And Lisa is one of the lawyers on our national executive. She's our vice chair right now. Prabrit and Ramnik and Kimat. So all of these lawyers, and they indicate the languages that they speak as well. Those are basically you can call to get free assistance and some direction and answer. So I just want to point that to you. And you can just search, once again, you can just search Pro Bono Initiative, Crisis in Afghanistan, CBA, and that should pull it up for you. Let me just see if I can, maybe I can, I'm going to flip back here, and I'm not sure if I'm actually going to be able to put that link in. Let me just see if I can pull this up. Let's just see if I can put it into the link. Probably, I don't know if you guys will be able to see it, especially you Facebook people. That's when I'm broadcasting to multiple streams. It's hard for me to be able to, let's see here. It's hard for me to be able to, let's go home here and find the actual feed. It's hard for me to post to everything. So let me just see if I can say something. Yes, I can. Okay. I'm just going to post the link. And so you'll be able to see that in the feed. And Saeed, you're on the YouTube channel, so you should be able to see that link, and that will take you back to the link where you can get some assistance. So, but our heart goes out to you, my friend. Okay, good to see you. Likely to progress, you guys. Okay, and I can see now we're finally getting to everyone who's responding to the comments. So I do, because I take what I'm doing, I take the platform that I have very seriously. And I know that a lot of people are watching and relying upon what I say. And when I make comments that are not thought out, obviously I don't have a lot of time to think about this stuff, and I say stuff that offends people, I take responsibility for it and own it. And I'm by no means am I perfect. I make mistakes all the time, as you guys can see. But one thing I never ever want anyone to question is my sincere desire to help people. Okay, but thank you for that comment. Yeah, this is a good question, Akram. Current border restrictions and entry requirements to Canada will remain in effect until November 21st. After this date, do we expect fewer restrictions or vice versa? It all depends on what's happening with the virus in Canada. It all depends upon the vaccination rates and the number of infected people, the number of hospital emergency stay, how full the hospitals are. That's what's driving the ship. That's what's driving the ship. Okay. Let's see here. And lots of people, yeah, talking about, okay. Karen says FSW Express Entry waiting since February 2020. My heart goes out to you, Karen. No progress. We still think you're a hare and not a rotund bunny. That's because I'm only showing you my pudgy face. All right. Thanks for all you do. No cancel culture here. Do you know what, Karen? I hate cancel culture. I really do. I hate it. There are so many things that we can learn from the past and not repeat, but we don't have to cancel everything that's good in the process of getting there. You cancel it, then what do you have left? What the heck is being replaced? What is replacing cancel? When something is canceled, what's replacing it? And that's the problem that I have, is that, there's horrible mistakes made in the past. Absolutely. We need to learn from them, and we need to grow and never repeat them. But it doesn't mean that we cancel it. Like even those who said we're not going to celebrate July 1st, or we're not going to celebrate Canada Day. I have huge issues with that, huge issues, but that's a whole separate discussion, and I'll leave it at that. Good morning, Sharif. Good to see you. Okay. That's a good question, Akram. Why none of the media or journalists in Canada contact with IRCC to ask about the future of FSW Draws? I think they respond to media inquiries. Absolutely, Akram. And so it's all a matter of getting the attention of the newspaper. But here's the simple response: you guys are not in Canada, and that's why you're not as big of a story, because at least throughout the election, there were domestic issues that all the parties were fighting over, not the poor people that are outside of the country in limbo for years and years. And it's as simple as that. you know, when you have real life stories that affect Canadians and permanent residents, they make the news. But when it comes to the plight of overseas foreign nationals who do not yet have legal, well, the same types of legal rights as Canadian citizens and permanent residents, that's why it's not creating a story within the media. And that's why social media and everything that you guys are doing now is exactly the way that you can get the message out. And obviously, it's something that I bring up all the time when I have my meetings with immigration. Okay, Jovi says, Mark, my husband has an open work permit. Does he still need an authorization letter from IRCC to travel to Canada? Jovi, I'm going to ring that bell, and I'm going to tell you to slide right over here and click on the link to speak to a lawyer right here and book a consult. Every situation is different, and I don't want to say, yep, he can hop on a plane. I don't want to say that because we need to look at the whole background. So Jovi, I strongly encourage you to come here, book a consultation, and Alicia is our travel expert. So book a consultation with Alicia, and she can help you to sort out whether or not your husband is able to travel. Okay. Here's someone on Facebook. I believe people are too sensitive these days. In fact, I agree with your statement because I'm the one who wants to immigrate to Canada. Hence, your government does not owe me anything. When do you think the next FSW will happen? Will Trudeau's win provide certain stability to us? Well, the reality is I think there was this perception out there that somehow if the NDP or the Conservatives, well, really the Conservatives, I think, that if they got in, that it would destabilize all of immigration and there would be a lot of problems for all of the immigrants out there who are in the queue, that it would affect programs, and that was simply not the case. All of the parties, as you've seen, have always been consistently pro-immigration. And, so there would have been, obviously any party, if the Conservatives got a majority, they're still very pro-immigration, as you could see from the platform. But regardless of whichever party got in, the Liberals, obviously they're going to continue forward. They've got the same minority government as they had before. They're going to continue forward with the same approach that they've taken and follow through with the things that they had promised in their campaign, and even the things that they had released and announced before the elections took place. Okay. Okay, Mohammed, another one. This is a specific question for you, and I recommend that you book a consult. Slide over here and book a consult with Alicia, and we also have Susan here as well that can help you. But back to your specific question, one of the factors that they look at in the context, and I really need to complete my study permit course. I never did follow through with that. Everything else just kind of blew up. But the reality is when you have a high degree, you have to be able to demonstrate how the education you're taking in Canada is going to help you to improve your job prospects back in your home country. And when you have a situation where you've got a master's degree, maybe there's a big gap in the time in which you're looking to study in Canada, going and taking a postgraduate diploma in engineering. When you have, a bachelor's in engineering and a master's in management, you have to show how this education is actually improving your opportunities for employment in your home country and advancing your career path. And that's largely the problem, especially when people have a high level of education, a master's level, and then they want to take a diploma level program in Canada. Often that can be a factor used on the negative side when they're assessing whether or not to approve the study permit. So will it cause a study visa refusal? Well, in and of itself, that's probably not sufficient enough on its own, but they use it in conjunction with everything else. Maybe you're now older, maybe there's a gap in your education. And so it does play a role. And remember, they're actively looking and assessing for people that they feel fit the pattern of people that are only going to study to get more points for express entry. And that's what they're trying to block. Okay. Okay. So Vasilisa, I'm going to tell you to book a consult. So slide over and we can talk about this in detail because your question is very, very specific to just you. And it's definitely legal advice. Let's see. I'm just trying to find some other questions. And it says, hey, Mark, one of my friends got a PR card, but in that PR card shows the wrong photo in it. You have to notify immigration, my friend. And same thing, if you want to book a consult, we can help you to navigate through that. There's errors. Immigration makes errors. Okay, so this person, Canada is one of the few countries to utilize the benefits of immigration. It's true. Canada is one of the fewer countries that's pro-immigration. And the best historically, but unfortunately the management of these issues has been subpar. It has been over the last while. Largely, you can attribute it to obviously the pandemic, but yeah, it's been subpar. Okay, let's see here. What else we have? And then there's some kind people making some kind comments. I appreciate that, recognizing that I'm human. Thank you, UG. And I appreciate, Jobin, your kind comments there, you guys. Let's see here. There's some that have been duplicating their comments, and it does take a long time because they're coming in from Facebook, like you'd see with Jobin here, as well as YouTube. So that's why it's kind of skipping through. Yeah, Dania, like Grover, my heart goes out to you. PPR since November 2019. Something, yeah, from IRCC. It's so hard because you're probably getting ready to travel right before the travel restrictions, and then you were stopped. But Dania, for you, well, I guess you were waiting for the passport request since November. Yeah, so you just filed your application then. Yeah, and you're just caught in it. So many people are caught in your situation. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Ghost updates. You know what? You guys have seen the disaster. I tried to log into my rep portal even this morning and I couldn't log in. So ghost updates, often ghost updates are triggered sometimes when an officer is actively working in the file. And sometimes they'll start down a path and then they'll back up and then they'll, because they didn't finish what they were doing, and then they come back to it later. And sometimes that triggers these ghost updates where there's nothing in your file. It's just a product of the GCMS system being old, archaic, overrun, working over capacity, and just constantly failing. Grace, no, I wouldn't go to get biometrics for the TR-to-PR pathway until they give you specific instructions, because you'll get a bill, a biometric instruction letter, and you don't want to go and request it. You need that, in other words, to get your biometrics. Mariana, greetings over in Milton. Okay. Vishvesh, ring the bell. This is a tough one. Traveling when you have a TR-to-PR pathway, but no AOR yet. You've seen what happens. You've seen how many people have been locked out of India because of the travel restrictions. We'll see. We'll see if they truly do open it up on the 27th or right around there. I think that's the day. But ultimately, you've seen the problems. And with the TR-to-PR pathway, one of the obligations is that you're in Canada when that application is approved. And if you're stuck outside, yeah. Lucy, thanks for your positive comments there. I really appreciate that. Let's see here. And then people talking about their status and the frustrations. Okay, this is a good question, Mohammed. He says, can you create a profile to be considered in another stream if you have an EE application in process in a different stream? FSW in process, profile with Alberta, EE, PNP. There's no restrictions unless the actual provinces restrict you. So when it comes to express entry and having, say, received an ITA, the moment you receive an ITA, then if you're midstream with one of the provinces, they can see that you've received that ITA, and then they'll ask you to withdraw or cancel that PNP. But there's nothing stopping you from having, a provincial nomination application going in one province while you have one going in another province. Ultimately, you have to show an intention to reside in that province that approves you. And it can get a little complicated, but having multiple applications is not prohibited unless the actual program themselves say, hey, you need to choose. Raj, due to your live streams, I got PR in TR-to-PR. Big shout out. Thank you, Raj. That makes me happy. Thank you so much. Okay. Pierre says Sierra score 530. Yeah, that's really high. Should I try to get PR via sponsorship instead, as FSW Draws are blocked? My common law partner is Canadian. Yes. PR, yes. That's what I recommend that you do. Ultimately, there's nothing stopping you from pursuing both. Obviously, if you've got your profile in the queue, you're just waiting for the draw. And if you get drawn, you can always withdraw the spousal if you want. But I always take the position because of the volatility within immigration. And I wasn't like this when I first started practice. I knew exactly which path to go. I knew I knew what to expect. And I would never waste time filing multiple applications. But that's changed now. With the volatility of everything, I pursue everything that's available to me. And then whichever one gets processed first wins. And then I withdraw the other one. Can we use our temporary UCI at EAPR? Well, it doesn't matter, John Rep. When you create a profile, you're given a temporary unique client identification number. And so if you want to put that one in, you can. Obviously, it's not a problem. You have the ability to do that. If you have a temporary one, it just depends upon, like immigration, they're just trying to make sure that all of your applications are all associated with the same client identification number, which is why it's the unique client identification number. Some people, when you have multiple UCIs, it's because they have multiple U's in the system. And, and really it shouldn't be that way. They need to be merged. When I worked on the border, when it was just kind of FOSS, the old field operating system, we would often get people who we'd find up with multiple entries. And so we would always try to merge them together into the same one. Thanks, Shabine. I really appreciate that. I need all the blessings that I can get. Trust me. Okay, so Muncie says, a friend of mine got an AOR. However, on the AOR, it says it generated on August the 30th. They received email notification on September 18th. Do you know why is this happening? Well, it's pretty simple. The officer initiated it, but then didn't prompt the actual email to go out until later. So it's not a big issue. Obviously, when it's generated is not a big issue. What's important is just that you're following whatever steps going forward, but that's not uncommon. Yes, Ramya, have FSW inland pending since May 2020. Feel stuck with my work permit expiring soon. Are the FSW inland and outland applications considered the same? They are right now. And this, personally, they say they have no mechanism to distinguish who's inside versus out. It's a product of the archaic system. Hopefully whatever new one they're creating is going to be able to separate people out like this. But that's the report we've had, is that they have no meaningful way of separating who's in Canada versus out in an efficient way. I'll just leave it at that. But Ramya, remember, if you've got your acknowledgement of receipt, you can always use the bridge to extend your work permit. And that's kind of where, and remember, it's open, right? So the bridging open work permit is the route for you to be able to transition. Okay. For FSW, must my letter of good intent be recent, or can it be from roughly 2 years ago? Thanks, you, Mark. I'm not quite sure what you mean by letter of good intent. The Federal Skilled Worker Program through Express Entry, there's letters of explanation if you're explaining something, but a letter of good intent, I'm not sure if that's is that a gift deed, or I'm not sure. So that one, UG, I'm not able to answer. Okay, let's keep zipping through here. We're into overtime a little bit, but I'll go a little bit longer and then we'll wrap it up. I know that there are so many questions here. And as always, if you don't get your question, please just slide over here and book a consult with one of us. And in 25 minutes or 50 minutes, whatever you prefer, we can cover everything that you need and set you back on the right track. And even after the consult, you may very well decide to retain us, to have you have us do a full collaborative review of your application, a complete peace of mind option where we help you with everything, even revising and correcting letters of explanation and putting things into place. And you get complete access to my Express Entry step-by-step course, which I just finished the last one and it was awesome. And I had a fantastic time. And you can see right here, the next one starts October the 18th right here. And all you have to do is get the course, click here, and you can access to all the course material right now. And make sure you head down and check out all the testimonials of the previous people. We're just in the process of adding in all the wonderfully kind testimonials from the people who just finished the last class on Saturday morning is when we had the last session. So, but make sure you head over there. Those of you who are going through Express Entry, this little course here can help you save yourself from yourself. And that's one of the things that people notice, is that there were things they thought they had it all under control. And then someone will ask a question, or they'll watch something in the video. One person that I just had a consult with, who booked, actually I got an email from, who just took the course with me, said that they were following the instructions on some YouTube channel, and they actually gave them the wrong information. It was wrong, incorrect advice. And when we watched the video, now they have to go back and try to correct it. And so, yeah, and the course was entirely created by myself. So go head on over there. There's a link in the description, at least there should be a link, and you can join us in the next group, but you have access to all the video course material at your fingertips right now, and you have access to everything for life. You're admitted into our private Facebook group. It's all set up, and it's just waiting for all of the next cohort. And then starting on October the 18th, that's when I will go live every evening, 5 to 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and for an hour every evening to answer any extra questions that are not otherwise covered in the course. And it goes, and we can dive in way deeper than we can in the live Q&A here. Okay, let's wrap up with one last question. Okay, I'll finish with Asmar here. This is a family-based one. Okay, so Outland Family Sponsorship. Do the principal applicant's parents and siblings need to have an immigration medical exam in case they are not coming with her to Canada for the permanent residence? So remember, when it comes to family sponsorship, and I'm assuming when you say a principal applicant, I'm assuming that maybe it's spousal. If it's a spousal sponsorship, in those situations, only those accompanying, only those that are dependents, I should say, and because it's only those that are considered to be a dependent need to have the immigration medicals completed. And in the context of a spousal sponsorship, siblings are not, and parents are not considered dependents. So if you, as the wife or the husband, have parents and siblings, of course, that are not included within your application because they're not dependents, no, they do not need to complete immigration medicals. If there's something else that I'm missing, if it's a parent-grandparent sponsorship and the parents and the siblings of the parent are still within the age of dependency under 22, and not married, then in that case, that sibling might be someone who would need to get an immigration medical, but it's because they're actually classified as a dependent in the context of the application. If you have any extra questions, Asmer, just book a consult. All right. Okay, guys, I'm going to wrap up here. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I apologize for not being able to get to everyone's question. But like I said, book a consult with the firm. We'd love to help you and dive right deep in and make sure you're getting everything answered that you're looking for. Those of you who've stuck it out through the live here, this really makes my week. I love doing these lives. I love giving. I love helping. I love trying to support people. And in return, I hope that, the whole giver's gain philosophy applies, that when you give, that it comes back. And the reality is, if you know of anyone that's looking for assistance, I hope that you think of Mark Holthe and his firm. Go contact Mark. He can help you with your application. And there's very few things that we don't do. So thanks so much, everybody. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope that you all have a wonderful week, and I know I will be popping on a lot more. All right. Take care. See you later.